بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So I just want to get a quick lay of the land. Some of you may not know this, but Houston is like a foreign land to me. I don't live here. People oftentimes assume I live in Houston. I do not. I've never lived in Houston. I have no plans of ever living in Houston. But it's good to be here, alhamdulillah. So how many people here have ever taken Al-Maghrib seminar before? Raise your hand. Okay. Has anyone here taken an Al-Maghrib seminar with me by any chance? A few people? Abdullah, you don't count, but okay, yeah, you count. Okay, Bismillah. So if you've taken an Al-Maghrib seminar with me before, you know that when I'm teaching a seminar or a class, it's a little bit different than like a one-off lecture. So you may have heard me talk at like an ICNA convention or something like that. Those talks are very different for me. When I teach an Al-Maghrib seminar, when I'm teaching a seminar, when we get a little bit more academic, I try to very much impart as much as I can, number one. And number two, I try to make it personal. I have found that with myself, over the years of learning and teaching as well, that when we find a personal connection with the knowledge, not only do we retain it more, but it actually has an impact on our lives. And that is the only point where that knowledge actually becomes beneficial to us. If it's information that we're hearing and we move on with our lives and nothing has changed and we haven't applied that knowledge in our lives, not only is it a waste of time, but it also could be that a proof has been established against us. You know, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Al-Qur'an hujjatun laka aw alik. The Qur'an is either a proof for you or a proof against you, or another interpretation, it will be a witness for you, or it will be a witness against you. Meaning, and we have authentic narrations where the Prophet ﷺ told us, يُؤْتَى بِالْقُرْآنِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. The Qur'an will be brought on the day of judgment, and it will intercede for the person who memorized the Qur'an and the person who lived the Qur'an. And in one narration, the Prophet ﷺ, he defined the Ahlul Qur'an. And then he said, Ahlul Qur'an, الَّذِينَ كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ بِهِ. You know, when we hear Ahlul Qur'an, the people of the Qur'an, we often think of the Huffaz. Allah reward them and bless them and increase them. Allahumma ameen. But the Prophet ﷺ did not describe Ahlul Qur'an as the Huffaz, as those who have the Qur'an memorized only. He described the Ahlul Qur'an, الَّذِينَ كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ بِهِ, those who would act upon the Qur'an. And sometimes I give this one statistic that kind of, some people it kind of shocks them and some people it rubs them the wrong way, but it is what it is, right? Most of the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum, they were not huffaz of the whole Qur'an. There were some Sahaba that were, but the vast majority of them did not. It was not their goal to memorize the Qur'an from cover to cover. And the reason wasn't because they're lazy, wal-'iyadhu billah, or they didn't want to put in the effort, or they didn't have the time, or whatever it may be. The reason was, as Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, he says, I would not pass by a few ayat except that I had implemented in my life, except I had lived it. Yani I wouldn't keep memorizing if I cannot say, you know, I'm living my life by these ayat, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And certainly when Aisha radiallahu anha, when she was asked about the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she responded, "Kana khuluquhu al-Qur'an." His character sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the Qur'an. Yani he was an embodiment of the Qur'an. He was a living, breathing example of the Qur'an. Because the Qur'an, as it sits on a bookshelf, or it sits in our car, or it sits on our phone, and I'm very fearful, subhanAllah, that the Qur'an is being established against many of us because it sits on our phones. You know, I asked Umar right now, I said, do you have a mushaf on you? He's a hafid, mashallah, may Allah protect him and increase him, Allahumma ameen. I said, do you have a mushaf on you? And I'm used to like old school huffaz, right? While I was waiting for him to like pull out a little mushaf, like all grimy and stuff, or the years of tahfīd, and I'm sure he has one of those. It's in the car. Okay. He said, no, I got my phone. Like, I'm good to go, right? And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It means that we have access to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has become easier for us to access the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when it comes to the Qur'an as a proof, we cannot come on the day of judgment and say, you know what, I didn't have access to it. And we cannot even come and say, well, you know, it can't be a proof against me because I didn't memorize the Qur'an. If you had the ability to recite the Qur'an and to listen to the Qur'an, then it's automatically an evidence against us. Because now we are responsible for the knowledge that we are not accessing. You have to understand the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, how they were with the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us their hearts would tremble upon hearing the recitation of the Qur'an. Why? Because they valued this knowledge. They valued the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Unfortunately, in our times, it's become so commonplace that sometimes we just have it playing in the background. All right, someone's doing some work or doing some chore and the Qur'an is playing in the background. Look, that's better than not listening to the Qur'an. I'm not here trying to shame anybody for listening to the Qur'an. But what I'm trying to say is that if we're not applying the Qur'an in our lives, then there's a problem. And before we can apply the Qur'an, right? So like if I just left you right now and said, okay, ma'as-salama, go home, apply the Qur'an, that'd be a problem. Because the question should be how? How do I apply the Qur'an? How do I live the Qur'an? Before you can act upon the Qur'an, we have to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. We have to understand. For many of us, Arabic is not our mother tongue. So when we hear the Qur'an, we may not understand. And even for those who Arabic is their mother tongue, they may not have the linguistic capacity to understand the Arabic of the Qur'an, right? And this sometimes surprises a lot of non-Arabs, right? They're like, you speak Arabic, you must understand everything in the Qur'an. No, this is classical Arabic, right? And so it requires effort to understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. And the beauty is that this book is preserved for us. Its understanding is preserved for us. Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun. We have sent down this remembrance, meaning the Qur'an, and we will preserve it for you. It's there for us to benefit from, right? It's there. So the only question is, are we making the effort to understand it, number one, before we can act upon it? And number two, just because we understand the words, it doesn't mean we've made an effort to apply that in our lives. And I'll simplify this for you very much. How do you, once you've understood the Qur'an, you understood what Allah is telling us, you got to personalize the message. You have to ask yourself, very simple, it's a simple question. How does this verse apply to me? What impact does this ayah of Allah have in my life? How can I begin to live my life according to this ayah? You know, we've all memorized Inna ma'al usri yusra, right? What does that mean? What does that mean? Naam. With hardship comes ease, right? It's like, we all know this. Some people have it in their Insta bio, right? It's a feel-good thing to say. That's one thing. But how many of us can say that when I'm faced with a calamity, when I'm pushed to my limits, any limits, like I feel like I cannot function anymore. Like the hardship has come to that point. I mean, let's just be real right now. We are watching horrific images of children being torn apart, children being brutalized. And this is not normal, by the way. For human beings to look at those images on a daily basis, that's not a normal way to live. It's extremely traumatic. And so it's not, yes, we are being pushed to our limits. But at those limits, are we saying, Allah said that with hardship comes ease, that the ease is connected to the hardship, that the more severe the hardship is, the closer the help of Allah is. And also, if we understood these verses, we would know that the ease, the relief is always greater than the hardship. And that means we can persevere. If what I'm going through the end of it is going to be better than what I'm going through. The relief is going to be more than what I'm going through in severity, then I can make it. That's what it means to live the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our lives. And so when we look at the life of Isa alayhi salam, a lot of times when we approach the life of Isa alayhi salam, it's especially as Muslims or Muslims living in America, it's from the perspective of like a theological debate, right? We had a Christianity conference a couple weeks ago, a month ago, something like that. And one of the things that Umar, I remember you said this at one of the masjids, that we need to understand Christianity beyond, right, the 3 and 1 and 1 and 3, right? It's like if you're old school, you watch those Ahmed Deedat debates where he'd be like, how could it doesn't make sense, 3 and 1, 1 and 3, like doesn't make sense. And kind of some of us, we just stuck with that, and like that's all I need to know about Christianity, right? Is that it's impossible. 3 beings, 1, no, and like God can't have a son. Like, it doesn't make sense. That's all I need to know about Christianity. That's all I need to know about Isa alayhi salam. The reality is, regarding Isa alayhi salam, he is a part of our faith. From the arkanul iman is believing faith in the messengers, prophets and messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is part of our aqidah to understand Isa alayhi salam, the life of Isa alayhi salam, the message of Isa alayhi salam. Even if that hadith did not exist, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, this hadith of Jibreel, where Jibreel alayhi salam came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, tell me about Islam, tell me about Iman, tell me about Ihsan. I'm sure you've come across this hadith. And regarding Iman, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you believe in Allah and so on and so on. And he mentioned the arkan of Iman. Even if that hadith did not exist, it is enough for us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has over and over again in his book mentioned Isa alayhi salam and praised Isa alayhi salam and mentioned the story of Isa alayhi salam, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has dedicated a chapter of the book of Allah to the mother of Isa alayhi salam, Maryam alayhi salam. That should give us pause. We hear Christians oftentimes saying that Muslims are like, when it comes to defending their faith, like they're really strong. Because if someone says something bad about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they get up in arms. They get very upset. But we're Christian, and when Jesus is insulted, like, why don't we care? And you know what I think? I'm thinking, yeah, I guess, but where are the Muslims also? How come we're not offended as well? Yeah, we showed them an example of how to believe in a messenger, right? But that messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is not alone. He is in a long line of succession of prophets and messengers, alayhim as-salatu was-salam, right? And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he felt this kinship towards Isa alayhi salam. In the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu mentioned in the Sahihain, he said, "Ana awla an-nasi bi ibn Maryam." He said, I am the nearest of all people to the son of Mary, or to the son of Maryam. He said, Al-Anbiya awladu allatin. He said, the prophets are paternal brothers. Laysa bayni wa baynahu nabiyyun. He said, there's no prophet between me and him. He felt this close kinship. In another narration, also in the Sahihain, he said, Ana awla an-nasi bi Isa ibn Maryam fi dunya wa fil akhirah. I am the nearest person to Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus, the son of Mary, in this worldly life and in the afterlife as well. وَالْأَنْبِيَاء إِخْوَةٌ لِعَلَّاتٍ. He said the prophets are paternal brothers. أُمَّهَاتُهُمْ شَتَّى. Their mothers are different. وَدِينُهُمْ وَاحِدٌ. But their religion is one. Their life is one, right? The Prophet ﷺ felt this kinship, and we claim to love the Prophet ﷺ. Where's our love for Isa alayhi salam? How much do we know about Isa alayhi salam? How much do we know about his life? How much do we know about what he was like? The Prophet Isa alayhi salam will be buried next to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he returns. Did you know this? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam instructed us that he should be, when he returns, he will be buried next to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Non-Muslims, when they hear this, they're shocked. They're like, that's how much you revere Jesus, that he will be buried next to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is the kinship that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and our scholars say when interpreting that narration, that why is Isa alayhi salam, why is he supposed to be buried next to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? It's because one of the wisdoms there, they say, is that the two prophets will be united in death and in the place of burial, just like they were united in their mission. And this is an ayah. And we know, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we'll get to this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَلِنَجْعَلَهُ آيَةً, we will make him an ayah, a sign. And so imagine, subhanAllah, being alive at that time and witnessing the coming of Isa alayhi salam, and then witnessing the death of Isa alayhi salam, and calling Isa alayhi salam, we know will come back and there will be no khilaf regarding Isa alayhi salam. Today there's khilaf, right? You have some Christians who believe him to be the son of God. You have the Jewish faith that does not consider him to be a prophet at all. And some people in the Jewish faith will even insult Isa alayhi salam, right? Various beliefs. On that day, there will be no khilaf regarding Isa alayhi salam. People will be united. Imagine how it will feel if we had loved Isa alayhi salam, right? That is why it is important for us to love Isa alayhi salam. Did you know that the Prophet Isa alayhi salam has been mentioned by name 25 times in the Qur'an? Does anyone know how many times the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is mentioned by name? No, not 2. Not once. Not 4. 5. We're bound to get there. Of course, we have way more information about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's no doubt about that. But that should give us pause. The fact that Isa alayhi salam is referenced that much in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now,
So was name Muhammad or just issue?
no, not to mention. He's mentioned way more than that. But this is a direct reference to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam even gave us the physical description of Isa alayhi salam. You know, when you love someone, you want to know everything about them. And you know this from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because there are books, volumes dedicated to how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, how he behaved, how he acted, how he looked. We know very intimate details about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so, likewise, with the Prophet Isa alayhi salam, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave us physical descriptions about him. You know, I used to teach a class called Trends, which dealt with the fiqh of clothing. And we had a whole section on hairstyles. And how, you know, we talked about how the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the men amongst them, the norm at that time for men, I don't know if y'all know this, but it was long hair, right? That was just the norm. Most men had long hair. And one of the things I mentioned in that seminar is that this is something that seems to be consistent not only with the Sahaba, but also with the prophets. That it seems that in the descriptions of the prophets, you know, the Prophet ﷺ, on the hadith of Al-Isra, the angel Jibreel, took the Prophet ﷺ, ascended, right? And he was able to see and meet the prophets and the messengers. And so we have descriptions of, and what we find is a lot of them, they have long hair. Isa alayhi salam is being described as having long flowing hair that's pretty straight, a little bit wavy. And the Prophet ﷺ said that it appeared as if his hair was wet. And some scholars went into detail regarding that. They said, did something happen? Did he go through something that his hair became wet? And one of the interpretations is no, that his hair was so beautiful that it looked wet, right? And back in the 90s, there was this style. I don't know if some of y'all probably too young for this, but guys would like put a lot of gel in their hair, right? It would glisten, right? There's a certain level of beauty to that, right? And in certain cultures, they put oil in their hair, right? It's a sign of beauty. So the Prophet is describing Isa alayhi salam as being someone who's beautiful to look at. And he's described as having broad shoulders. He's well proportioned. He had large, expressive eyes. He had a noble face. This is how much detail the Prophet went into regarding Isa alayhi salam. We know that not only is Isa alayhi salam honored in the Qur'an, but the mother of Isa alayhi salam, Maryam alayhi salam, holds a unique position, an honored position in Islam. As we said, an entire chapter is titled Surah Maryam, chapter number 19. And this chapter, it emphasizes the character and the piety and the nobility of Maryam alayhi salam, where Isa alayhi salam, how he was raised by Maryam alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the mother of Isa alayhi salam, Maryam alayhi salam, وَكَانَتْ مِنَ الْقَانِتِينَ. She was among those who were devoutly obedient. And our scholars mention a very beautiful point here. They say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have said, وَكَانَتْ مِنَ الْقَانِتَاتِ. What's the difference between qanitat and qanitin? Who knows? Bismillah. If it's a Maghrib seminar, I have chocolates to give you right now, but no chocolates. Yeah, go ahead.
So qanitin is the jama' of qanit, which is one sincere person, so plural will be sincere people. In general, it is ascribed to only males, but in Arabic you can use it for a jama' of both males and females.
Right.
So when
What about qanitat? So he said
Specifically-
qanitin would refer to either all males or males and females.
Correct.
Correct. What about qanitat?
specifically only for females and not at all for
Could you have a
males.
male amongst the qanitat or no?
Cannot never have
No,
males.
you wouldn't, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said she was among the devoutly obedient, from the best of them, right? And our scholars say not just the women, but the men as well. Yani, it's not just that only women recite Surah Maryam and listen to the stories of Maryam alayhi salam and say, MashaAllah, she's an example for us, but also the men. The men should reflect upon also the piety of Maryam alayhi salam. And that's why, like today, we're going to go through some of the ayat in Surah Maryam, which I know sometimes like women tend to prefer those ayat because they speak about childbirth and difficulties and so on and so forth. But men need to pay special attention because those themes are not just for men. Those themes are for women as well, and we'll get to some of that inshallah ta'ala. So that's Maryam alayhi salam. Now, before we get into the story of Isa alayhi salam, real quick, his story is mentioned in 7 chapters in the Qur'an, 7 surahs in the Qur'an. Should I quiz you on this or no? Should I just tell you? Should I tell you? One is obvious. What's one? Okay. Surah Al-Ma'idah, Al Imran, Maryam, Ahsan, Jazakallah khair.
That's spirit.
Naam.
You started like
We can't change order now. You already started with Ma'idah. What is left? Khalas, let's fill in what's left. Okay, I'll just tell you. How about that? Okay, Maryam, right? We have Ma'idah, we have Al Imran, right? The family of Naam, Surah Saf, Ahsant, Hadid. What else? Saf, Nisa, and one maybe lesser known one is what's left? Hufad in the house. Zukhruf. Okay, Surah Al-Zukhruf. They all reference different parts of the life of Isa alayhi salam. I'm not going to get into too much detail about that. So before we get into Isa alayhi salam and the beginning of his life, his birth, a couple key figures, like a cheat sheet you can keep with yourself right now. A little bit of the people that surrounded Isa alayhi salam. Of course, Maryam alayhi salam we mentioned, right? Who was she? The mother of Isa alayhi salam. We have Imran alayhi salam. Who was he? The what? The father of who? Isa alayhi salam? A'udhu billah. The father of Maryam alayhi salam. Very good. And the grandfather of Isa alayhi salam. Okay. Then we have Zakaria. Who was Zakaria? Naam. Okay, very good. Maryam alayhi salam's uncle. So the husband of Maryam alayhi salam's aunt. But I don't want to say more importantly, but what is a little bit more relevant to us, he was the caretaker of Maryam alayhi salam. Right? Yes, kafil. Ahsan. And the father of Yahya, that's the last person we're going to mention. Who was Yahya? Earlier I was talking to Fahad and we were going through some of the names. And I said something and he like caught him off guard. I said he was Isa alayhi salam's homeboy, right? Nothing. No, I'm not gonna repeat that. He was his friend. He was his contemporary. He was his cousin, right? And when Isa alayhi salam came, he initially, when he was given, as we will see, he was given knowledge, he was given hikmah, he was given wisdom. He was supporting his cousin Yahya, right? In the mission of calling people back to tawḥīd and so on and so forth. So that is a little bit of the key figures in the life of Isa alayhi salam.
Yahya is one who is known as John the Baptist.
Naam. Yes. Jazakallah khair. Okay. So now we're going to start. I actually had a very ambitious goal for tonight, but it's not going to happen. So I don't want you to accept realistic expectations. I wanted to go through the whole Qur'an, all the ayat that reference the life of Isa alayhi salam, and go through his life from the Qur'an. But we can't do that. So we're going to at least get through his birth, inshallah ta'ala. And remember, the goal here of tonight is not to just gain information, right? Is not to just take notes, even though for me, taking notes is wajib. In my classes, like I usually tell students, like, listen, you got to take notes. If I look at you, at least pretend to take notes, right? At least, like, I don't care. You can be on your phone. I'll just assume you're taking notes. But I need to know, like, we're in this together. Like, I'm just not here talking by myself. Like, this is a process that we're learning together, inshallah ta'ala. So it's not just about, but notes are important, but it's not just about notes. It's about building our love and appreciation for Isa alayhi salam, right? So we are more informed. And when we talk about, when we're living in a society that has a huge Christian population, and we talk about Isa alayhi salam, it's not just, hey, he's not the son of God. He's not one of three. And that's it. That's where as we said, that's where the conversation ends, right? We need to show Christians how to love Isa alayhi salam by following his message, by submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by preaching tawḥīd the way Isa alayhi salam preached tawḥīd, right? So that is living the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we're going to start with the miraculous birth of Isa alayhi salam. In Christianity, this is often called the Annunciation of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Basically, this is the miraculous birth of Isa alayhi salam. We know that Isa alayhi salam was born without a father. He was born through direct divine intervention, or we can say he was divine creation. We know that the creation of Isa alayhi salam has a parallel with the creation of Adam alayhi salam, that they were both created without what? Without a father. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Ali Imran, verse 59, إِنَّ مَثَلَ عِيسَى عِنْدَ اللَّهِ كَمَثَلِ آدَمَ. That the example of Isa alayhi salam in the sight of Allah is like that of Adam. خَلَقَهُ مِنْ تُرَابٍ ثُمَّ قَالَ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُونَ. That he created him from dust, then he said be, and he was. Is this referring to Isa alayhi salam or Adam alayhi salam? Which one? You got to pick one. Okay, the first meaning is Adam alayhi salam. Our scholars say it can also be applied to Isa alayhi salam in the sense that, two things. Number one, Allah mentions two things, right? خَلَقَهُ مِنْ تُرَابٍ. He was created from dust or dirt or clay. Was Isa alayhi salam created from clay? Were you created from clay? You were created from clay? Who's created from clay? Who's made out of clay over here? Bismillah. Okay, so the origin of our creation as the children of Adam alayhi salam, we can say we were originated from clay, right? But we're not physically clay, right? Like if I pour water on you, you're not going to melt, right? You're not going to break apart if I throw a rock at you, right? Y'all with me, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used clay to create Adam alayhi salam, originate our creation. So in that sense, was Isa alayhi salam created from clay? Yes, because he belongs to the children of Adam alayhi salam. ثُمَّ قَالَ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُونَ. Then Allah says, then he said be, and it was, and he was. Does this apply to Adam alayhi salam? Of course. Does it apply to Isa alayhi salam? Spoiler alert, we're going to get to it, but yes, right? That is part of how Isa alayhi salam was created. Some of our scholars say that there are three types of creation or unnatural creation, or what we would consider unnatural creation, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fulfilled to show miracles. The first is created from nothing, without a father, without a mother. Who was that? Adam alayhi salam. Number two, created without a mother, but from, well, actually, we'll wait for that. Created from a female without a father. Who was that? Isa alayhi salam. Then we have a female created from a male. Who was that? Hawa. Created from the rib of who? Adam alayhi salam. So in this way, some of our scholars mention this point. So that is the miraculous birth of Isa alayhi salam. Let's get into the verses from Surah Maryam, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of how Maryam alayhi salam first received this news. So we're going to recite, inshallah ta'ala, verses 16 to 21. I think you should have it in the paper in front of you, inshallah ta'ala. Surah Maryam, number 19, Surah number 19, verses 16 to 21.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
واذكر في الكتاب مريم إذ انتبذت من أهلها مكانا شرقيا فاتخذت من دونهم حجابا فأرسلنا إليها روحنا فتمثل لها بشرا سويا قالت إني أعوذ بالرحمن منك إن كنت تقيا قال إنما أنا رسول ربك لأهب لك غلاما زكيا قالت أنى يكون لي غلام ولم يمسسني بشر ولم أك بغيا قال كذلك قال ربك هو علي هين ولنجعله آية للناس ورحمة منا وكان أمرا مقضيا.
Bismillah. Okay, so I wanted you to hear these verses before we get into them, inshallah ta'ala. So you're a little bit familiar with them, and that's why we provided some places for you to take notes, inshallah ta'ala. No one has an excuse to not take notes, right? Everyone has this paper. Yeah, you're good? Okay. Bismillah. We'll start with verse number 16. It says, وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ Maryam. Remember or mention in the book Mary or Maryam. First question, who is this being directed to? Mention Maryam. Who is this command being given to? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Right here, part of the message of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam is what? Maryam alayhi salam. And through Maryam we will get to Isa alayhi salam. Once again, this is our connection with the story of Isa alayhi salam and the story of Maryam alayhi salam. وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ. In the book. Mention in the book. Which book is this? The Torah or the Injil? Which one? Which one? Torah? Any takers for Injil? No takers for Injil? Who agrees? Who says Torah? Raise your hand. Who says Injil? Raise your hand. Like the rest of y'all, what? What's the answer? The Qur'an. Ahsantum. Yes. The Qur'an. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by Al-Kitab means the book. Mention, meaning, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, remind the people through the verses of the Qur'an that I have set down to you the story of Maryam alayhi salam, her giving birth to Isa alayhi salam, how she gave birth, how she delivered Isa alayhi salam, right? So the purpose of this is to clarify the story of Isa alayhi salam, to clarify and to make known every little bit of information in the Quran is relevant to us. We may not know of why or how, but every letter, every harf in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is relevant to our lives. And so the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is instructing the Prophet and saying, mention this story, it means now it becomes relevant to our lives. And also, the point here is that Allah is telling the Prophet ﷺ, and by extension us, that if Allah had not revealed this story, then we wouldn't have had clarity on it. Meaning there is a point or portion of the story that has been lost if it wasn't for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling it to us. Right? So now what are we doing here? We're receiving this miracle. This is part of, and this, our scholars say, this testifies to the Prophet ﷺ being a messenger of Allah, because he is able to convey this message. He was unlettered. Where did he get this information from? Where did he get these details that were lost? Right? There are details that we know about the story of Isa alayhi salam that are not found. You go to the Christian scholars and Jewish scholars, and they will not have any idea what we're talking about. We know this only because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So this directly affirms the prophethood of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ Maryam, setting up the story of Maryam alayhi salam and Isa alayhi salam. إِذِ انْتَبَذَتْ مِنْ أَهْلِهَا مَكَانًا شَرْقِيًّا, when she withdrew from her family to a place facing east. Where was Maryam alayhi salam at this point? In this incident, where was she? Okay, in general, Sham, can we narrow it down more? Baytul Maqdis, very good. Where in Baytul Maqdis? Where?
أقصى المحراب.
What we know is that it is an eastern portion, right? Some of our scholars say, it's two interpretations. Number one, it's an eastern portion of Baytul Maqdis. Some of our scholars say that no, she was facing the east. Allahu alam, which is more correct. But we do know that the place where Maryam alayhi salam was a place of barakah. It was a place of blessings. It was a pure place. It was an elevated place. Some of our scholars have mentioned that because the barakah descended here, Allah provided for Maryam alayhi salam, that it was a very pleasant place to be. That even the breeze that was there was refreshing and cool, and it had a nice smell to it. It is in a place like this that the angel Jibreel came. So the angel Jibreel, as we will see, is an honored being of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, an honored angel. And he descended in an honored place. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, فَاتَّخَذَتْ مِن دُونِهِمْ حِجَابًا, that she screened herself off from them, meaning the people. So we know that Maryam alayhi salam, and honestly, if we had more time, we should actually start it with the beginning of the story of Maryam alayhi salam. But we know that the mother of Maryam alayhi salam, she had vowed that her child will worship Allah and devote themselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what Maryam alayhi salam did. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted the wife of Imran, Maryam alayhi salam, so she fulfilled that vow. That even though she was expecting a boy, but Allah gave her a girl, she says, Allahu a'lamu bima wada'tu in one recitation, Allahu a'lamu bima wada'at in another recitation, right? Allah knows exactly what He gave her. Meaning it's not by accident that the wife of Imran alayhi salam was granted a female. That Allah wanted to set a female as an example, and obviously set the stage and set the things in motion for Isa alayhi salam to come. But she was, so what would she do? She would seclude herself, screen herself off from other people, and she would be in her mihrab or in her section where she would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and no one would bother her. She would keep herself separated. And so that is why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَأَرْسَلْنَا إِلَيْهَا رُوحَنَا, that we sent our spirit to her, or our angel. We'll talk about this ruh. It was extremely shocking for Maryam alayhi salam. Like imagine, subhanAllah, you have secluded yourself. In our times, I guess the closest equivalent for us as Muslims would be i'tikaf in the masjid. Imagine you're sitting in the corner of the masjid, and sometimes, in certain masjids, by the way, that have more of a separation, there sometimes sisters have like a section where they have like a screen. I remember I went to one masjid, they didn't have like a partition between the men and women, but there was a section, there was like a curtain Because some of the women, even though, because there's no partition between the men and women, some of the women were like, well, we're not really comfortable being in that space. So they were provided with a curtain, cut off. Imagine, subhanAllah, a man walks in there, right? How odd would it be? Right? And she is now, she's pretty much cut off from people. And not just any man. This is a man, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَتَمَثَّلَ لَهَا بَشَرًا سَوِيًّا. That he came and he came before as a man, perfectly formed, like a good-looking man, right? Our scholars say because this is a good-looking person to make it as comfortable for her as possible, but for her, it's still a strange man walking into her private space. And so now she is, subhanAllah, scared. What's going on here? Like, who dare come into my space? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ruhana. This spirit is referring to Jibreel alayhi salam. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala attributes something to himself, it is to honor that thing. So the haram is Baytullah, right? The house of Allah. Is it physically the house of Allah? Does Allah reside in that? No, of course not. But it is attributed to Allah to honor it, right? And means it's a Mubarak place. And likewise, when a messenger is attributed to the Prophet, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولُنَا, our messenger has come to you. Allah could have just said a messenger, but Allah said Rasuluna, our messenger, meaning Allah's messenger, to honor this being. So now this tells us that this angel is being attributed now to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning everything that is happening here is by the decree and the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is not just any being that has come, this is the being Jibreel alayhi salam. Allah tells us, فَتَمَثَّلَ لَهَا بَشَرًا سَوِيًّا. He appeared before her as a man, perfectly formed, so that she finds comfort in this, at least in the physical appearance. It also tells us, by the way, that the angels have the ability to take human form. And this is something that was granted to certain prophets and messengers and certain pious people. We see here, Maryam and Jesus was able to see the angel Jibreel in human form, right? The prophets had the ability to recognize that this human being was an angel. Are we able to see angels in human form? Yes or no? No? In human form? Yes. Do we know we're looking at an angel? No. But the prophets, ﷺ, according to one opinion, they had the ability to recognize that this is actually an angel. Likewise, by the way, with the jinn, but I'm not going to get into that. If you want more details about that, I teach a class on the shaitan. You can check that out, inshallah ta'ala. So we're not going to, I don't know why I mentioned it. I shouldn't have mentioned it. Because now y'all going to be thinking jinn now. Let's not talk about the jinn. You know when they say, don't think about an elephant? All you can do is think about the elephant. So now all y'all going to be thinking about jinn now this whole time. Forget the jinn, the angels. Let's talk about the angels. So the prophets had the ability, and this is why we mentioned the hadith Jibreel earlier, where Jibreel came to the Prophet ﷺ in the form of a man, narrated by Umar radiallahu anh. We hear from Umar radiallahu anh that a man came wearing all white clothes. His hair was like jet black. He was very clean. And Umar radiallahu anh says, we did not recognize this person. And the point of that is, it's strange because if we don't recognize him, it means he came from outside. But if he came from outside, there's no indication of travel on him. So it was an odd situation to begin with. And so this man, we know he came, he sat next to in front of the Prophet ﷺ, فَوَضَعَ كَفَّيْهِ عَلَى فَخِذَيْهِ. One interpretation of that is that this angel, this person, put his hands on the thighs of the Prophet ﷺ. One interpretation is that he put his hands on his own thighs out of respect. And then he asked him, O Muhammad ﷺ, tell me about Islam and Iman and so on and so forth, right? Later on, the Prophet ﷺ asked Umar, do you know who that was? And Umar radiallahu anh says, Allahu wa rasuluhu a'lam. Allah and His Messenger know best. He says, that was Jibreel. He came to teach you your religion. Point is that the Prophet alayhi salam was able to tell that was the angel Jibreel. So here, Maryam alayhi salam, she sees, right, Jibreel, but she does not recognize him as an angel. So what is her response? Right, instinctively, what does she do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قالت إني أعوذ بالرحمن منك إن كنت تقيا. She says, I seek refuge in the most compassionate from you. If you are taqiyya, God-fearing, if you have taqwa, meaning, so leave me alone if you have taqwa, if you fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, I think about our times and how if a strange man came in, or we can flip the script, right? There's a brother making i'tikaf in the masjid, and a very, how to put this in a politically correct way, beautiful woman comes in, right? Into the place where this brother's making i'tikaf. What is the first thing that's going to come to our mind? What are we going to say? Most likely, who are you? What are you doing here? Hi, what's going on, right? Maryam alayhi salam, her first reaction wasn't, who are you? What are you doing here? There's no istifsar here. There's no like, let me find out. Because she's like, even that, I don't want that contact. That's too much. There's no time for like this long conversation. Get out of here, right? She says, Inni a'udhu bir-Rahmani mink. I seek refuge in the most merciful from you. I seek Allah's protection. Doesn't matter who you are. You're not related to me. You're not my mahram. I don't know you. So it's irrelevant who you are, where you're from, where you live. Like, I don't want to hear any of that. Like, this is the level of modesty of Maryam alayhi salam. She's not interested. First thing she says is, I seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the most compassionate from you. In kunta taqiyya, meaning leave me alone if you are pious, and if you are God-fearing. And this is also tells us that this is a statement of those who are pious, right? That they seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When they are tested and tried, they immediately seek refuge in Allah. And that tells us, even for us, when we are in a position or in a place where we're being tested or tried, our first reaction, we have to train ourselves to say, A'udhu billah. Yusuf alayhi salam, when he was being seduced by the wife of Al-Aziz, what did he say? Ma'adh Allah. Right? Once again, seeking refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is my protector. Allah will protect me. Allah will save me in this case. So that should be something that we try to incorporate with ourselves. Is no questions, man. You got to wait. You got to wait. All right. So now, what is the response to that? She's expecting two things. One of two things. A normal human being, a normal human response. When you say that to someone, right? Somebody walks in, you're like, I seek refuge in Allah, like, get out. Like, I don't want to talk to you. Like, no, I want nothing to do with you. Get out. Two things. Either they're going to say, no, hold on. Actually, let me tell you what, like, let me, da. Or they're going to leave. What she was not expecting to hear is what this man says. قَالَ إِنَّمَا أَنَا رَسُولُ رَبِّكِ لِأَهَبَ لَكِ غُلَامًا زَكِيًّا. He says, I'm only a messenger from your Lord. And this innama serves two purposes. Number one, exclusive. I'm only and only. I nothing else. This is the only reason I'm here. There's nothing else about me that's important except that I'm a messenger from your Lord. And innama is also for emphasis. And this is to emphasize this point. Innama ana rasulu rabbik. I'm only a messenger from your Lord. Now that is a connection that she understands. She's devoted her life to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now she sees that this man is saying, I'm a messenger from your Lord, لِأَهَبَ لَكِ غُلَامًا زَكِيًّا, to bless you with a pure son. And now, this is a glad tidings that is being given to Maryam alayhi salam. In this frightened state, she hears that, and now, she is someone who is used to, because we know that she would receive sustenance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now she begins to get a little bit calm, right? To understand, to make sense of what is happening here. Jibreel alayhi salam now comes. He gives her this good news that a pure, noble child will be born. قالت, she replies to this. أَنَّ يَكُونُ لِي غُلَامٌ. She responds, how can I have a son? How can I have a child? وَلَمْ يَمْسَسْنِي بَشَرٌ. When a man has never touched me, meaning I've never been intimate with a man. She's actually, as we said, completely cut off, right? She's never had even any type of even conversation that would, there's nothing there. لم يمسسني بشر, and a man has never touched me. وَلَمْ أَكُ بَغِيًّا, and I've never been unchaste. And now, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding us of the chastity of Maryam alayhi salam. We have to understand here that when Jibreel alayhi salam says that I'm a messenger from your Lord, she believes him. She understands what's happening. She believes the news, but she doesn't understand how. So she understands, okay, this is a messenger from Allah. This is an angel from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the question is, how is that even possible? Right? How is it possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant me a child? And so she emphasizes here her chastity and her piety here. Jibreel alayhi salam responds to her. And he says, قَالَ كَذَلِكَ. And this is a strange response. Because what this means is, he replies and he says, so it will be. Meaning what? Meaning you will have a child, even though you have never been intimate with a man, no man has ever touched you, and you have never been unchaste. Meaning both are going to be true. قَالَ كَذَلِكَ. It's going to happen, right? So he says, this is how it is. قَالَ رَبُّكَ. Your Lord said, هُوَ عَلَيَّ هَيِّن. It is easy for me. Meaning now, this is not what Jibreel alayhi salam is telling her, is not from him. He's not bringing his own news. He alluded to this earlier when he said, أَنَا رَسُولُ رَبِّكَ. I'm a messenger of your Lord. Meaning, who is sending him? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Where is the message coming from? The message is coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So he says, قَالَ رَبُّكِ هُوَ هَيِّن. This is, your Lord has said, this is something easy. وَلِنَجْعَلَهُ آيَةً. As we said earlier, that he is now telling her that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, it will happen, right? Even though in your mind it doesn't make sense, that you have never been unchaste, you've never even been exposed to a man, yet you will have a child. It's going to happen. Both will be true. And for your Lord, it is easy. Indicating to her that this is a miracle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not only will she have a child, an ayah, a sign. وَلِنَجْعَلَهُ آيَةً لِلنَّاسِ. For the people. And now there's a very subtle connection here to the prophethood or the messengerhood. Is that a word? Messengerhood? Is that a word? Yeah? All right. The messengerhood of ʿīsā alayhi salam. Where is that found in what I've just said or what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in this ayah? Already she has learned that her child will be born in a miraculous fashion and that child will be a prophet and messenger. Where is that? Well, I'll repeat it. قَالَ كَذَلِكَ. Right? He said, so it will be. قَالَ رَبُّكِ هُوَ عَلَيَّ هَيِّن. Your Lord has said it will be easy for him. وَلِنَجْعَلَهُ آيَةً لِلنَّاسِ. And we will make him a sign for the people. I gave you the answer. I pretty much gave you the answer. Other than, what's your name again, brother? Other than Brother Kamran, someone else. I literally pretty much just gave you the answer. What's the answer? Where is the indication that her child will be a prophet? Okay, raise your hand. Bismillah. Yeah, go ahead. What is it? Okay, explain.
It will be a sign for the people.
It's a miracle. Khalas, we've established that. But where is the prophethood being alluded to here?
For mankind.
What did you say? What did Brother Kamran give you the answer? I don't know. I think that table needs to be checked. Did you help? Did you tell her? You at that time. Khalas. Yeah, go ahead. We haven't gotten to mercy yet. We're not there yet. We're still at وَلِنَجْعَلَهُ آيَةً لِلنَّاسِ. We will make him a sign for the people. I just need you to connect the dots. It's right there. very good. So this is not just an ayah or an ayah for you, Maryam alayhi salam, an ayah for the people. So it's not direct and it's subtle, but there is a connection that he will connect with the people. That there's something that will be connected from him to the people. وَرَحْمَةً مِنَّا. That's where we get to a mercy. So we learn here that not only is he an ayah, but he will be a source of mercy for mankind.
Just like Prophet ﷺ was also Rahmatul Alameen.
We'll get to that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, before we get to the mercy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلِنَجْعَلَهُ آيَةً لِلنَّاسِ. The lam there is significant because lam indicates purpose, right? So why was Isa alayhi salam born in this way? Why did he have a miraculous birth? For the purpose of, to make him an ayah for human beings, meaning for the purpose of that prophethood and that messengerhood, right? And to call people back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَرَحْمَةً مِنَّا, and a mercy from us. Meaning, he will make him a source of mercy for humanity. And we know that the very nature of prophethood and messengerhood is mercy. Because the fact that people are able to return to Allah through that knowledge and through that guidance is a mercy. If I were to ask you right now, what is the biggest blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to you in your life? The biggest blessing. I don't want you to answer this. I'm just going to tell you the right answer so you know. The answer is Hidayah. The answer is Islam, right? Yes, we love our children. We love our wives. Any individual men love their individual wives. I'm not saying anything else, right? Wives love their husbands, their individual husbands, right? Their children and their families and so on and so forth, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above all of that. And so the biggest blessing we have from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is belief in Allah, is tawḥīd, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And that is the job of the prophets, to call people to tawḥīd, to call people to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Then the angel Jibreel alayhi salam ends this statement, and this is the end of the kalam between Jibreel alayhi salam and Maryam alayhi salam, with وَكَانَ أَمْرًا مَقْضِيًّا. And this is a matter that is already decreed. It is already decided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, telling us that the creation of Isa alayhi salam and the coming of Isa alayhi salam is a matter of divine decree. And this is part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan. And this is, and we also learn here that Isa alayhi salam comes into existence through divine decree. The next ayah that we're going to recite, we haven't recited it yet, is فَحَمَلَتْهُ, that she conceived him. Okay? So there, okay. She conceived him. Now, is there something missing in the story right now? What's missing?
The time period between
Not time period.
her gestation period, her pregnancy.
Exactly. Nothing happened. Right? So Jibreel alayhi salam came and said, Allah will grant you a child and he will be an ayah and a mercy and so on and so forth. And then the next thing in Surah Maryam, the next verse is فَحَمَلَتْهُ. She conceived him. She was carrying him. Right? So, yes. We'll get to that. That's a good point. We're not talking about the time, right? We're talking about, even if it was 1 second, it has to happen, right? So, where is that? We learn this in other portions of other places in the Qur'an. So, we hear, for example, in Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 91, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Maryam alayhi salam, وَالَّتِي أَحْسَنَتْ فَرْجَهَا, and mentioned the one who guarded her chastity, فَنَفَخْنَا فِيهَا مِنْ رُوحِنَا, and we blew into her through our angel. وَجَعَلْنَاهَا وَابْنَهَا آيَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ, and we made her and her son a sign for all of existence. And so here we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referencing what's missing in the story, what's supposedly missing, but we know the Qur'an, it completes the rest of it. So that detail is mentioned there. Also, it is mentioned in Surah An-Nisa, verse 171, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا الْمَسِيحُ عِيسَى بْنُ مَرْيَمَ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ وَكَلِمَتُهُ أَلْقَاهَا إِلَى مَرْيَمَ وَرُوحٌ مِّنْهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and his word, indeed that is only Al-Masih, Isa, the son of Maryam, a messenger from Allah, وَكَلِمَتُهُ, and the letter, and his letter, أَلْقَاهَا إِلَى Maryam, that was granted or given to Maryam, وَرُوحٌ مِّنْ, and a spirit from him. Now I just quickly want to talk about what does the spirit from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mean. In our aqidah, what this signifies is not that this is the spirit of Allah, right? So in Christianity, they may interpret this as God blew his spirit into, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, into Maryam alayhi salam, right? But in our aqidah, this signifies that the creation of Isa alayhi salam involved a special act of divine intervention. And so that's the ruhun min. And kalimatuhu, our scholars interpreted, one of the interpretations is the word of Allah is kun. Because he was created by saying kun, be, and he was. Kun fayakun, right? Be. So he was created by that word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So this is what happened in between. And now we can get to Maryam alayhi salam giving birth to Isa alayhi salam. We're going to recite verses 22 through 26.
فحملته فانتبذت به مكانا قصيا فأجاءها المخاض إلى جذع النخلة قالت يا ليتني مت قبل هذا وكنت نسيا منسيا فناداها من تحتها ألا تحزني قد جعل ربك تحتك سريا وهزي إليك بجذع النخلة تساقط عليك رطبا جنيا فكلي واشربي وقري عينا فإما ترين من البشر أحدا فقولي إني نذرت للرحمن صوما فلن أكلم اليوم إنسيا.
So now we pick up in the story where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَحَمَلَتْهُ, and she conceived him, فَانْتَبَذَتْ بِهِ مَكَانًا قَصِيًّا, and she withdrew to a remote place, a distant place, a faraway place from the people. Imagine, subhanAllah, and I know, like, for women who have given birth, obviously they can relate to this a lot more. Imagine, subhanAllah, that all of a sudden a man appears, and then you find out this is Jibreel alayhi salam. And in a miraculous way, life is blown into you. And now you're pregnant. And you're about to give birth. And the sister was asking about the time. We'll talk about the time, right? Like how long was that period? We'll get to that. But now you're about to give birth. And the only explanation that any human being would understand is that an immoral act took place. And so this is and I want you to think about the psychological state of Maryam alayhi salam. There's a reason why she is an ayah. She is a sign. The amount of strength she had and determination and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the last thing a woman who is pregnant wants to do, I've been told, I don't know this, I'm not a woman, right? I got to add that caveat. The last thing a woman wants to do when she's about to give birth is have no support and be by yourself. There's so many question marks, right? And sisters who have gone through a pregnancy, you know what it's like. There's so many questions about, how the pregnancy is going to go, the health of the child, your health. There's so many unknowns. It's a very high level of tawakkul upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described it as wahan, ala wahan, right? Hardship upon hardship, difficulty upon difficulty, right? It's like layers, layers and layers and layers. And I can't imagine the psychological state, right? But I've been told, that's the best I can do to try to empathize, is that it's just layers and layers of question marks. There's the physical pain, there's the emotional pain, there's the uncertainty. You don't know what's going to happen. There's so many layers and layers and layers. Now imagine all of that and you're by yourself. And so it is in this state, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَانْتَبَذَتْ بِهِ مَكَانًا قَصِيًّا. She withdrew to a remote place. She can't go to anyone and say, help me, or no. Full reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, where's this remote place? Some difference of opinion regarding what this makanan qasiyya is. But it seems that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best that this is, anyone know? Bayt Laham, right? Or Bethlehem. We know this because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and this is a long hadith that deals with the Isra, the night journey, which we referenced earlier. In that hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, he begins, in the beginning he says, Jibreel came to me and took me on the Isra, the night journey. And at one point he said, قَالَ أَنزِلْ فَصَلِّ. So Jibreel alayhi salam tells the Prophet ﷺ, get down from the riding animal, فَصَلِّ, and pray, get down and pray. فَنَزَلْت فَصَلِّيت. He said, so I got down and I prayed. Then Jibreel alayhi salam said to him, أَتَدْرِ أَيْنَ صَلَّيْت? He said, do you know where you prayed? And then Jibreel alayhi salam tells the Prophet ﷺ, صَلَّيْتَ بِبَيْتِ لَحْمٍ حَيْثُ وُلِدَ عِيسَى عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ. You prayed in Bayt Lahm, or Bethlehem, where Isa alayhi salam was born. And so this is a pretty strong indication that that was the place, and Ibn Kathir and others have also referenced this place as well. But this is a place 9 miles away from Jerusalem. So I know that doesn't seem a lot to us, but imagine, once again, a woman by herself, give birth, she goes to a secluded place. She delivered her child in this remote place away from the eyes of people. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of what happened next. فَأَجَاءَهَا الْمَخَاضُ إِلَى جِذْعِ النَّخْلَةِ. The pains of labor drove her to the trunk of a palm tree. Intense pain. She needs some type of support. She needs to, like, the pain was so severe. And once again, I can't relate to this, but sisters have given birth, right? The pain is so severe, she had to hold on to something. And that pain drove her action, right? So it drove her to the trunk of a palm tree. The fa here is employed, okay? The fa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَأَجَاءَهَا الْمَخَاضُ إِلَى جِذْعِ النَّخْلَةِ. Then the pains of labor drove her to the trunk of a palm tree. Our scholars say that fa is important because that fa in Arabic generally indicates that something happened very slowly, right? Very slowly? I'm just trying to see who's paying attention. Exactly. Fa means generally, not always, but generally immediacy. So the scholar said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَحَمَلَتْهُ. She conceived quickly, right? Happened quickly. فَانْتَبَذَتْ بِهِ مَكَانًا قَصِيًّا. She withdrew to a remote place. Fa is important. So it seemed to indicate it's very quick. فَأَجَاءَهَا الْمَخَاضُ. And then quickly she went to her labor pains drove her to the palm tree. How long was this period? Now, some of our scholars say there's no reason to believe because we have no sarih, like direct evidence to say it was anything other than a normal pregnancy that took 9 months. So some scholars say, no, it was a typical pregnancy that lasts 9 months. Other scholars say, no, it happened immediately. What is the evidence for that? Number one, this has been attributed to Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, in which he said her pregnancy and delivery occurred within a period of a very short span of time. He didn't mention how long, but he said all of it happened very, very quickly. Second is the letter fa, as we said, immediacy. Third is that if you think about Maryam alayhi salam being pregnant, and if she had a normal pregnancy that lasts 9 months, what would happen? People would notice, right? And that she's carrying a child. And okay, khalas, maybe she's secluded from the men and so on. But somebody would notice. Someone would notice. Right? So it seems, and Allah knows best, there's no way for us to say this for sure. And that's the opinion of some of the scholars, that it happened very quickly. And also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we will make him an ayah. So every part of Isa alayhi salam's birth is an ayah. Not only that he was born without a father, not only that life was blown into Maryam alayhi salam, but even the pregnancy itself, how that pregnancy happened quickly, is an ayah. What is the most correct answer? What's the most correct answer? Allahu a'lam. Very good. Very good. So that is the, as we said, immediacy. When we hear that she was driven to the trunk of a date palm or a palm tree, what this is telling us is her psychological state and her physical state. So as we said, physically, she was driven. She needed support. She was in a lot of pain, right? Some of our scholars have even said that this indicates that the child itself was struggling and moving, ready to come out into the world, right? There was a sense of urgency. So physically, right? And then also emotionally, when a person is driven by their body to do something, that means their emotional state is very heightened. And you can think of a clear example of this is anger, right? When someone says, like, I got angry, that's why I did it, right? Have you ever seen a hijabi flick somebody off on the road? Have you ever seen this? I've seen it. Have you ever seen this? No one's seen it? I'm the only person? I thought there was a lot of Muslims in Texas, in Houston. Or you don't want to say. Polite? No. And subhanAllah, you would think, a hijabi doing something like that? A'udhu billah, like, how is that possible? Well, hijabis are human beings, right? First of all. Number two, we can't say just because somebody's wearing hijab, they're never going to make a mistake. Number three, y'all bunch of hypocrites. Because think about the time you got angry when you were driving a car and the type of things that you were thinking. Maybe you didn't say it. Maybe it didn't turn into an action of your hand. But what were you thinking when somebody cut you off? You know, there's one comedian, what he said? He said, if somebody's driving fast, the other person's always wrong, right? If somebody's driving faster than you, you're like, look at this idiot driving so fast, so crazy. If somebody's driving slower than you, look at this guy, doesn't know how to drive, right? You're the only one who knows how to drive. No one else knows how to drive, right? We're in our bubble, right? We think we know what's up and everybody else is wrong and everybody else is at fault because there's no empathy there, right? And so the shaitan, we talked about this in the shaitan floods our mind with these thoughts. Look at this person, and we make up a whole story about them, right? This guy doesn't know anything, doesn't know how to drive, probably just got his license, all the whole story. We don't know this person, anything about him. But in our mind, all this stuff is happening. But that's a physical action that we normally wouldn't do, but it was driven by a lot of emotion, right? It's not normal for a hijabi to do, or a brother with a long beard, whatever, like you can call whatever you want, right? It's not normal, but when the emotion is heightened, the body may be the driving force, right? So that is the physical and the emotional state. And further indication of that is what came out of her mouth, alayhi salam. What did she say? She held on. She's clutching to the trunk of this tree. And she said, Ya laytani. She said, oh, I wish, mittu qabla hada. I wish I had died before this. Wa kuntu nasyan mansiya. And I was just in oblivion, forgotten. I was nothing, did not exist. I mean, this is so severe and this is so painful that I wish I did not exist. Now I need your help here. Do we have any psychologists or psych majors in here? One? That's it? I want you to help me figure out how many emotions Maryam alayhi salam is dealing with right now. Okay? So let's try to count them out. What is she dealing with? Let's get one. Go ahead.
Frustration.
Frustration. What is a frustration?
That she's just delivered a child.
Not delivered yet.
Oh, I think it's the pain.
Okay. The pain is causing her frustration. Okay, frustration. What else?
Anxiety and depression.
No, let's take it one at a time. What's the anxiety about? There's a lot of things to be anxious about, right? Delivering by yourself, as we said, no one there to help her. What else did you say?
The pain, being alone.
Being alone. What else?
The pain, the frustration, how to tolerate the pain.
There's something else you said that's very important.
Frustration.
No.
Depression.
No. About the anxiety. How is she going to face the people? I'm going to give birth. It's coming. It's happening. I can't do anything about it. How am I going to face it? Like, if she's dealing with pain, she's dealing with there's a physical pain, right? How is she going to tolerate this pain? And then on top of that, somewhere in her mind, that's how anxiety works, right? Somewhere in your mind, she's thinking, I got to go face people. And I got to explain this quick sequence of events. What am I going to do? Okay, what else?
And then nobody's going to believe her. So.
Yeah, so there's the anxiety about that. No one's going to believe her. Okay. What other emotions? Fear. What is the fear of?
The unknown.
Fear of the unknown. Okay, that's part of the anxiety. But yeah, okay, fear of the unknown. What else? Go ahead. Very good. What are they going to think of her? Because her reputation is known. And not only that, very good. Not only her family, right? Who is her uncle? Some normal guy? No. What is her lineage? Where does she come from? Right? So this is all playing in her mind right now. What else? Anything else that we missed here? Anything else? Any other emotions? Yeah.
How can a servant of Allah have, a child out of wedlock?
Okay, explain.
So for the people that she's an example to her people. She is serving Allah day in and day out. How can this woman be the one to do something so haram to the people's view?
Very good, right? The fear of like being perceived as a hypocrite, right? Not like the being so pious and well known and an example and so on and so forth. And now she's going to be perceived in that way. Yes.
Sadness too. I think one of the sisters mentioned
sadness. Yeah, we didn't mention yeah, go ahead.
Mentioned depression. Like only someone in a depressed state would even think and wish for death.
Ahsantum, right? We don't talk about this, right? We think depression is a bad word, right? It's a human, yes, there is a point where it becomes clinical and so on and so forth, but there's a type of depression that is very human, right? Even when it becomes clinical, I mean, are you a psychologist, psychiatrist? What's your, oh, you don't practice, but correct me if I'm wrong. It doesn't just pop up and it becomes clinical one day, that's it, it's over. Like it comes from, so it builds up, it comes from somewhere, right? There's part of it that is considered, you go to the DSM, right? And it's like, well, it hasn't become clinical yet, but it's a normal type of sadness because it's a human sadness. And sometimes we're afraid to acknowledge this sadness. We're afraid to say, I'm not feeling good. I'm feeling down. I'm feeling depressed.
And you're automatically giving the illusion that if you were with God, and if you're a godly person, you shouldn't be depressed.
If you are with God, if you're pious, what is there to be sad about? What do you have to be? Not only that, what do you have to be afraid of? What do you have to be anxious about? So on and so forth. We make human emotions and we translate them into piety, right? Piety is not, our emotions are not, it's how we react to those emotions, right? She is feeling all this stuff, right? And so it's a very human thing. This is very, very profound that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent her as an ayah, as an example, right? As a sign for us, for all women and men to look up to. And you see something very human about her. And we know that about the prophets as well. They were human beings. They were the best of us, but they were still human because we can relate to that. We can see ourselves and we can see the humanity in that, right? And so this statement, when she says, Ya laytani mittu qabla hada, I wish I had died before this. And I was just forgotten in oblivion. These are all the emotions that she is dealing with.
The fact that God mentions it in the Qur'an, makes a point of it, and that He loves her so much, allows us to feel like, wow, it's not bad.
So you know what you're doing right now? You're applying the Qur'an, we're applying it to our real lives. That is the purpose of reflecting upon the Qur'an. It's not just, as I said earlier, we don't want to just read these stories and be like, yeah, good for them, right? But do we connect on a human level to these stories? And that's why our scholars often mention, right, a woman who's going through pregnancy should read the story of Maryam and Jesus. This becomes like this cultural thing, and some scholars will be like, no, it's bid'ah, and so on and so forth. Like, we're not talking about that. We're not saying you make it a custom that every pregnant woman has to recite. So yeah, if you made it a custom, yeah, it becomes a bid'ah, right? Like a pregnant woman has to recite Surah Maryam. No. But do we find comfort in the Qur'an, in the stories of the Qur'an? The Prophet ﷺ story, all of the prophets, you know, the story of Yusuf alayhi salam was sent as a comfort to the Prophet ﷺ, because at that stage in his life, he was dealing with rejection and defeat after defeat after defeat after defeat. And Allah sends the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. Look, this is the example of a man, and that story was complete. The story of the Prophet ﷺ was not complete at that point. He was in the stage of difficulty and difficulty and difficulty and difficulty. And Allah sent to the Prophet ﷺ the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. Look at what he went through and look at the ending of it. That's why it's miraculous. It's very amazing that, you know, that's one of the few stories in the Quran that we find, boom, boom. Beginning, middle, end is like an arc, and like the character arc or whatever, or the, you know, 5 things of storytelling or whatever it may be, right? Perfect narrative, right? And that's not usually the case. We find stories mentioned in the Quran, they're relevant to different parts of what's happening, and different. That's why even the story of Maryam and Jesus, we find in different places of the Quran. But Yusuf is just one narrative altogether. Why? Because the Prophet needed to hear it, and not in that moment, he needed to hear the beginning, the middle, and the end. So we can find comfort in that story of Yusuf alayhi salam. This is a psychological state that Maryam alayhi salam is in. And the only
that he is an ayah and that he's a mercy, she's still like, this is for us to know that despite her knowing these great things that her son is going to be, she still felt these emotions. And instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminding her at this point, oh, you're getting this gift, this great son, the focus shifts to her and what is being provided to her. So often when we visit people, when they have kids, and we're just like, but you have a baby and he's beautiful and he's healthy.
Yeah.
And, you know, the focus now is on her and what she's doing.
Excellent point. Yeah. So it's very common that when somebody's going through a difficulty, we remind them of, like, look how great you have it, right? Yeah, you're being ungrateful, without acknowledging their pain and what they're going through. And look, let's just be real right now. Anything that we're dealing with right now becomes meaningless when we turn on our phones and see what's happening in Gaza, right? But does that make our suffering go away? No. Yes, it can help change focus and change perspective, but unless we acknowledge what we're feeling, we cannot start to deal with it, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the sister said, she's been given a miracle. She's been honored, right? And she's receiving this miracle, but her feelings are being acknowledged here in the Quran, right? In Revelation. So I wanted to set that stage of what she's dealing with and how difficult that is, and how emotionally challenging, to put it lightly. Because what happens comes to counter all of that, right? So you would think, how is somebody in that type of state, how are they going to be helped? What's going to bring them ease? What's going to bring them comfort? And it is nothing short of a miracle, right? So the answer to that is a miracle. What is the miracle? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, فَنَادَاهَا مِن تَحْتِهَا. He called out from below her. Subhanallah. He called out, like, this is not natural. It's not normal. This is not something a normal human being would expect. That comfort didn't come from just a normal human being. Imagine somebody walking by and be like, you'll be all right. You'll be okay. Don't worry about it. Look at the positive side, so on and so forth. None of that would be possibly comforting for her. Allah sent to counter her sadness and her depression and her anxiety and all that kind of stuff. Allah sent a miracle. Right? And some of our scholars make a beautiful connection here. They say, when we are dealing with things, don't cut yourself short by talking to just people. Talk to Allah. Talk to the miracle. What's the miracle that we have with us? The Qur'an. Like, when things are really bad, yeah, talk to people, and yeah, psychologists and therapists are great, right? Especially Muslim psychologists, therapists, alhamdulillah, more power to them, right? But there's something to be said about, we have a miracle with us. Maryam alayhi salam received a miracle at that point. Allah gave us a living miracle that lives with us. Exists, we have it. So we should turn to the miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَنَادَهَا مِن تَحْتِهَا أَلَّا تَحْزَنِي. He called out from underneath her, do not grieve. Honey, don't be sad. Don't bring this down. قَدْ جَعَلَ رَبُّكِ تَحْتَكِ سَرِيًّا. Do not grieve. Okay. Do not grieve. And this is so profound because it's 3 stages. Don't grieve about what happened, right? Don't grieve about what's happening. And remember we spoke about anxiety? Don't worry about what's coming. And an indication of that is قَدْ جَعَلَ رَبُّكِ تَحْتَكِ سَرِيًّا. Your Lord has provided a stream underneath you. Now, just want to mention this real quick because it's something the scholars of tafsir talk about. Who called out? What was that voice? Jibreel alayhi salam. Ahsant. Very good. Right? Yes or no? So scholars differed over this issue. One opinion is that it's referring to Jibreel alayhi salam. The other opinion is that it is ʿīsā alayhi salam who called out. Okay? So now that seems to be the stronger opinion and the more likely interpretation for a number of reasons. Number one, all the previous pronouns are referring to, so when Allah says, فَنَادَاهَا, like who called him, right, in Arabic it's referring to huwa. All the previous huwas, hims, are referring to ʿīsā alayhi salam, previously. So it would make sense that this is ʿīsā alayhi salam. Also, hold on. There is no indication that Jibreel alayhi salam is there in this process at all. There's nothing for her, because for her, Jibreel alayhi salam being there, or his presence being there, would be a source of comfort, right? Something. But she had nothing, as we said. And then later on, spoiler alert, what does she do when she's confronted by her people? She pointed at the baby. How did she know to do that? Right? Because one of the reasons, we'll get to it, but one of the reasons is because she knows. Right? She knows that ʿīsā alayhi salam, her child, already spoke. Right? So it seems that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best that it was ʿīsā alayhi. That's what narratively makes most sense, and that's why most of the scholars, it seems they pick that as the stronger opinion, that it was ʿīsā alayhi salam. What were you going to say?
I was saying that how does he know, like, Isa is inside, so how does he see the stream at her feet? So I thought it was Jibreel alayhi salam.
So look, the whole, as we said, everything about this pregnancy is miraculous, is an ayah. Right? And the reality is we haven't been given that detail. But if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to make it possible, it is possible. Now, also the stream, what is the stream? So the Arabic word sari, right, refers to a stream of water. Some scholars said this is metaphorical, right? There wasn't an actual stream, but this is referring to the coming of ʿīsā alayhi salam, and as he will grow up to be pure and noble and so on and so forth. But the more widely accepted view is that it was an actual physical stream, of a flowing stream of water that was beneath her. Because what's coming after that is also relevant, okay? So let's go with flowing stream of water. Then he says, وَهُزِّي إِلَيْكِ بِجِذْعِ النَّخْلَةِ. He says, shake the trunk of this palm tree towards you. وَهُزِّي إِلَيْكِ بِجِذْعِ النَّخْلَةِ تُسَاقِطْ عَلَيْكِ رُطُبًا جَنِيًّا. That shake this palm tree towards you, it will drop, or it will come. What will come down is ripe, fresh dates. Right. So our scholars say water, drink, and food. And then the next part is فَكُلِي وَاشْرَبِي. Drink and eat and drink. So the stream, y'all see the connection there? Y'all still with me? Yeah. So eat and drink. The drink is the stream. The water is the ripe dates. Okay. So what is of note here is ʿīsā alayhi salam is telling her to shake the trunk of this tree. Now, somebody else would have been like, I'm in a lot of pain. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. Like, what are you asking me to do? Like, shake a tree? But she didn't question it. Because the miracle, she already recognized this as a miracle, right? And so also our scholars tell us this teaches us the principle of al-akhdhu bil-asbab, to take the means, make the effort, right? As we know, tie the camel and so on and so forth. This is evidence, and we find this in all of the stories of the prophets and the pious people that are mentioned in the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. We see it over and over again. If Allah wanted to, Allah could just relieve them of their troubles. But Allah always instructs them, they're always instructed to take the means. So in that difficult situation, she's instructed to shake the trunk of the palm tree. And then Isa alayhi salam says, فَكُلِي وَاشْرَبِي وَقَرِّ عَيْنَا. So eat and drink and put your heart at ease. And now we see a change in her psychological state, right? So she went from that, a lot of anxiety, sadness, questions and so on and so forth. Now she's getting relaxed. She's been told, there's nothing to worry about. Basically, everything will be okay. You have to trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the things that you're worried about, it'll be fine. Or some of our scholars say this is also the connection to later on when she confronts or people confront her, that she's so calm. She's not like, oh, how dare you, da 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 da. She's so calm. And the instructions that are coming, why she so naturally accepts those instructions. So psychologically, la tahzani, don't worry. And also her physical needs, right? And this tells us that both are important. When we're trying to remedy how we're feeling and we're going through something difficult, we have to take care of our emotional or psychological needs and also our physical needs as well, right? So quick tip for those of y'all married, when it comes to the love languages, acts of service, and what's the verbal one? Who knows? Words of affirmation. And we're all different when it comes to our love languages, but we all have some of each, right? Some have more of one than the other. But, counseling sessions, you'll hear a husband say, like the wife will say, you never, I don't feel that you love me. And the husband will say, what are you talking about? I work all day. I go work this job that sucks. I hate it. But I work to provide for you. What do you mean I don't love you? And she'll say, yeah, but you've never said it. And he'll be like, seriously, I gotta say it. But her love language is that, yeah, those acts of service are important, but she also needs to hear it. I appreciate you. I love you, and so on and so forth. And the problem now gets compounded when it goes the other way. Her love language is words of affirmation. So she'll tell her husband, I love you, and I appreciate you, and this and that. And he's like, no, where are my acts of service? Right? What have you done for, you're not doing anything? And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm there to emotionally support you and so on and so forth. But we find here that the emotional support, right? And also taking care of the body. So it's all being happening together. And that is expressed to us in the words, وَقَرِّ عَيْنَا, right? And be contented. And this phrase in Arabic is, it's a very profound psychological message. It signifies a deep sense of satisfaction, peace, happiness, and comfort, right? And it often gets translated as coolness of the eyes, but this is I'm satisfied, right? We make the dua for our children to make them the coolness of our eyes. This dua isn't saying, oh Allah, make sure they're a doctor and they make lots of money and they're doing well. Because you can have a child who goes to, I don't know, journalism school or something, doesn't make a lot of money, but there's still a coolness of the eyes for their parents because their child brings them comfort and peace. And so it's not just about physical stuff or material things. This is, do I feel contented? Do I feel comforted with the situation? So this is the phrase that is used, وَقَرِّ عَيْنَا, and put your heart to ease. And then Isa alayhi, how much time do we have? Okay, we're going to try and get to the end, inshallah. And then Isa alayhi salam gives her a very specific instruction. So not only is it, he tells her to put your heart at ease, don't worry. He tells her how to go about that process, how to protect yourself. He knows that she's worried about the criticisms that she will face or the accusations that are about to be made against her. So he says, فَإِمَّا تَرَيِنَّ مِنَ الْبَشَرِ أَحَدًا, if you come across anyone, فَقُولِي إِنِّي نَذَرْتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ صَوْمًا, then say, I have vowed silence to Allah, the most compassionate. فَلَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا. Today I will not speak to anyone. The question that comes up here is, how do you say that if you're not talking? So how is it possible? If I say, listen, take a vow of silence and tell people that you've taken a vow of silence. Well, if I've taken a vow of silence, I can't speak. It seems nonsensical, right? It seems illogical. But what we learn here is that communication, فَقُولِي, communication can happen with other than words. It can be, and we will learn this, we'll see this, it can be an ishara, it can be a gesture, it can be with the hands, it can be with the eyes, it can be with body movement, it can be with body language, right? All of that can communicate, and we will see that that is what she does. And the beauty of this is the power of saying less, the power of silence. Because the more you say, the more that's going to get said back to you. The more she has to, she imagine, subhanAllah, the scenario plays out like this. She goes back to her people are like, what's going on? Which we'll get to. And she says, no, this is a miracle from Allah. Allah sent the angel Jibreel to me, and this is a miraculous birth. They said, how is that possible? Well, it happened to me, and don't you know, and this and that, or whatever. And it's like a never-ending conversation, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, right? In other words, social media, basically, right? Never-ending debates. Has anything ever gotten solved on Twitter? Have you ever seen two people arguing about something, and then like 50 comments in, someone's like, oh, Jazakallah khair, now I agree. Or you've opened my eyes, right? I no longer think this way. Thank you for guiding me to the truth. No one ever says that. It never ends, right? Never ends. And so to protect her from that, never-ending debate back and forth, stay silent, right? And so what happens? Verses 27 to 33.
فأتت به قومها تحمله قالوا يا مريم لقد جئت شيئا فريا يا أخت هارون ما كان أبوك امرأ سوء وما كانت أمك بغيا فأشارت إليه قالوا كيف نكلم من كان في المهد صبيا قال إني عبد الله آتاني الكتاب وجعلني نبيا وجعلني مباركا أينما كنت وأوصاني بالصلاة والزكاة ما دمت حيا وبرا بوالدتي ولم يجعلني جبارا شقيا والسلام علي يوم ولدت ويوم أموت ويوم أبعث حيا.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, فَأَتَتْ بِهِ قَوْمَهَا تَحْمِلُ. She returned to her people carrying him. قَالُوا يَا Maryam. They said, oh Maryam, لَقَدْ جِئْتِ شَيْئًا فَرِيًّا. They said, oh Maryam, you have certainly done something. Fariya is, in one sense, it's something unprecedented, but also it's something shocking, right? It's something horrible, right? That's what that word really encompasses. Like, it's shocking. We never expected this from you. It's something horrible, something strange. And you know what our scholars say? That they were so clever in the way they phrased this, because they didn't directly accuse her. So the first statement they make is not, what is this? Did you commit zina? Did this happen? No. They just said, you've done something horrible. So, and this tells us when people make accusations or people, for example, when slander happens or backbiting happens, it doesn't have to be literal. Some people say, like, I didn't say that, right? I didn't talk bad about her. I didn't say anything like that, right? But was it understood in that way? So they were very clear in what they're saying, right? So this first statement is not a direct accusation, but the condemnation is implied. And then they to further shame her, they say, Ya ukhta Harun, O sister of Harun, ma kana abuki imra'a saw. O sister of Harun, your father was not a indecent man. وَمَا كَانَتْ أُمُّكِ بَغِيًّا, and your mother was not unchaste. Now this is something that Maryam alayhi salam, did she expect this or not? 100%. She knew this is going to happen. Immediately her family would be brought into it. So, sister of Harun, scholars differed over this. Who exactly is this Harun referring to? One opinion is that it's referring to Harun alayhi salam, the brother of Musa alayhi salam. And what they're saying is that you come from this lineage, this noble lineage. And yet other scholars and Ibn Kathir and others, they lean towards that no, she actually had a brother by the name of Harun, because they're completing like the family set, right? Your brother, your mom, and your dad. Like your whole family, you're the only one. Like this is so shocking. Everyone is pious and you're the only one. And also there's the hadith of Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah radiyallahu anh, mentioned in Muslim, Sahih Muslim and Tirmidhi, in which where Mughira ibn Shu'bah talks about Najran, where he spoke to the Christians. And Mughira ibn Shu'bah says, when I came to Najran, the Christians there asked me that, don't you say that Maryam is the sister of Harun? Right? So they're like, we got you. And then he said, I replied, yes. And they said, but Musa came long before ʿīsā. And there was a long gap in between them. It doesn't make sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would reference, or the people would reference Musa all the way, Harun all the way back to the time of Musa. So they're trying to poke a hole in the story. And the Prophet ﷺ replied, he said, did you not tell them that the people of old would name their children after the prophets and the righteous before them? Meaning that she had a brother who was named after Harun, the brother of Musa alayhi salam. That seems to be the stronger opinion. So this is now, once again, not a direct accusation, but there's a lot of shame there, and the message is clear. Right? You've done something horrible. We're not going to name it, right? Because we don't want to, a lot of times people make the accusations, they'll pick their words very carefully to make sure they're not the bad guy. So they'll pick their words carefully because they want to get a rise out of you, right? They will antagonize you. In other words, the people we're talking about known as trolls, right? They're very deliberate in their language. They'll keep themselves neutral, but it's said to provoke, right? And because what they want is you to react in a negative way and say, aha, see, they're at fault. We're just asking questions. It's just a question. What's the big deal, right? And so this is the strategy that they're applying. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, فَأَشَارَتْ إِلَيْهِ. So she pointed to him. Subhanallah. So she communicated that he will give the answer. Don't ask me. And some of our Ibn Kathir and others mention there's no direct evidence from the Prophet ﷺ that this actually happened, but this is mentioned perhaps. I don't know where this information came from, but Ibn Kathir, I believe, mentions this, that she pointed up and then she pointed to Isa alayhi salam. And so they say that the indication of this is because Isa alayhi salam told her to say that I have vowed to Ar-Rahman. So the ishara is like this. Perhaps, Allahu Alam, that's what happened. So she says, I ain't talking. I'm vowed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then she points to Isa alayhi salam. Okay? Now, did she know that Isa alayhi salam will speak or can speak? Probably, right? Because as we said, depends on the previous interpretation of فَنَادَهَا مِن تَحْتِهَا, right? He called out from beneath her. And it seems to connect the two that she knew. And also the confidence it takes to hear that type of accusation and condemnation and the level of trust one needs to have in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so high. She's being accused, her family. Now they're saying you're a disgrace to your family and this and that and all this kind of stuff. And the confidence, the trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remain silent and point to Allah, point up, and then point to her child. SubhanAllah, if the incident isn't shocking enough, right? So they are shocked to see Maryam alayhi salam with a child. But even more shocking than that was the fact that she points towards a baby, an infant. And not just any baby. How long has it been since he's been born? How long? Maybe even less. How many of you have seen a newborn child? A newborn child, right? Can you imagine? We're not pointing at a toddler. Even a toddler, you're like, what is a toddler going to tell me? Right? Toddlers have nothing to say. Or even a 2-year-old, 1-year-old, maybe they're babbling something. Something will come out of their mouth. A newborn, right? Nothing. Like you just if you've ever been in that situation, I remember when my kids were born, you're trying to get them to like make any expression, right? And then people start imagining, oh, he smiled at me. Oh, he winked at me. No, baby ain't doing nothing, right? It's all you're projecting your love, mashallah, tabarakallah, right? Projecting your love, or like, oh, he hugged me. Like, no. It ain't nothing. هو الذي أخرجكم من بطون أمهاتكم لا تعلمون شيئا. He brought you out from the wombs of your mothers, and you knew nothing. They're learning. They're now absorbing everything. How to move, how to this, how to that. They don't know how to communicate right now, right? As much as you want to believe that your child, loved you and adored you, and they showed all this affection, and they, whatever, right? You want to make a TikTok and be like, oh, look at my newborn child. Allah. But that is the level of how preposterous it may have seemed to Bani Israel, right? These people were like accusing her of adultery, and she says, look at this new infant, just freshly born child. And so they respond, and they say, قالوا كيف نكلم من كان في المهد صبيا. How can we speak to one who is in the cradle, just a child? في المهد صبيا is important because it tells us that it's not just a child or a young. It's in the mahd, in the cradle, and they're now emphasizing that very point I just made. It's not just any. It's a newborn child. So they say, how is that possible that a child can speak to us? And then we hear the words of Isa alayhi salam. And now the rest of what we're going to cover tonight, inshallah, in the few moments that we have, I'm going to try to quickly run through the defense of Isa alayhi salam for his mother, the coming of his message, and pretty much his life. This is why, one of the reasons why he's an ayah, he's a sign. From birth, it's clear what his job will be. قَالَ إِنِّي عَبْدُ اللَّهِ. He now speaks. I am the servant of Allah. He declared himself. Now, our scholars say, the first thing he declared is tawḥīd, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the most important thing, right? So when we give da'wah 101, you always start with what? Why women wear hijab, right? We got to defend why women wear hijab. That's what we start with, right? Women's rights. We got to talk about women's rights. No? What do we start with? Tawḥīd, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The purpose of our existence, to worship Allah alone. And we find this is the manhaj da'wat al-anbiya. This is how all the prophets, right? This is common thread. They would begin with tawḥīd. قَالَ إِنِّي عَبْدُ اللَّهِ آتَانِيَ الْكِتَابِ وَجَعَلَنِي نَبِيًّا. Allah has made me a prophet. From birth, he is now, this is part of the ayah, part of the sign, the miracle. He's saying, Allah has made me a prophet. So right there, from birth, he is announcing his mission. He granted me the scripture, and he will make me a وَجَعَلَنِي نَبِيًّا. قَالَ إِنِّي عَبْدُ اللَّهِ. He said, I am the servant of Allah. آتَانِيَ الْكِتَابِ. He gave me the scripture. وَجَعَلَنِي نَبِيًّا. And he made me a prophet. وَجَعَلَنِي مُبَارَكًا أَيْنَمَا كُنْتِ. And he made me a blessing wherever I go or wherever I am. أَيْنَمَا كُنْتِ. What this means is, in every place, every time, every situation. Wherever I will be, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make me Mubarak. For those of you who speak Arabic or study Arabic grammar, this is ism maf'ul, meaning what? He has been made, right? Allah is the one. Now this is a connection with Allah. Allah has made him Mubarak. وَجَعَلِ Mubarak, right? This, as we say, we can call places, this is a Mubarak place, right? When we say Eid Mubarak, what are we saying? Huh? Meaning what? This is a blessed celebration, right? So this is what he's saying, that I've been made blessed no matter where I may be. And this blessing includes the fact that He will bring about goodness. The essence of barakah is goodness, right? So barakah indicates goodness. And this is why the Prophet said, al-barakah min Allah. Barakah comes from Allah. And barakah is all types of goodness. So Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, for example, he said that this means, he is saying, Allah made me a conveyor of goodness wherever I will be. In all situations, I will stand for that which is good. وَأَوْصَانِي بِالصَّلَاةِ وَالزَّكَاةِ مَا دُمْتُ حَيًّا. And he instructed me with establishing the prayer and the zakah, the alms tax, as long as I may live, right? So this tells us that this is a lifelong part of a Muslim, of someone who is submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the way of all the prophets, that part of our identity is the salah. Part of our identity is the charity, is giving to others. He said, مَا دُمْتُ حَيًّا, as long as I may live. وَبَرًّا بِوَالِدَتِي, and I will be kind or obedient to my mother. وَلَمْ يَجْعَلْنِي جَبَّارًا شَقِيًّا, and he has not made me arrogant or defiant. So he is affirming one thing, he's affirming something and negating something. He is affirming that he will be dutiful to his mother, good to his mother, kind to his mother, pious towards his mother. He will honor her and show her kindness. And then he negates, وَلَمْ يَجْعَلْنِي جَبَّارًا شَقِيًّا, that he will not be harsh or disobedient. Jabbar really comes from tyranny, right? Oppressive, being oppressive of others. And we can be oppressive in our actions, in our statements, in our behavior, even in our attitude. And shaqi is like miserable, wretched, meaning someone who shows this, like it emanates off of them, right? That they're in misery. So he affirms, and this shows us that part of the message of the prophets is negation and affirmation. The prophets didn't just come to tell us all that is good. They came to tell us all that is bad and also all that is good. To negate the bad and to affirm the good. And that is why part of the message of the Prophet ﷺ, part of the defining characteristics of the ummah of Muhammad ﷺ is al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa-nahy al-munkar. To enjoin the good, encourage people to do good, stand for good, stand up for what is right, but also to take a stand against evil, to take a stand against bad, to take a stand to try and put a stop to the bad that is occurring. وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَيَّ يَوْمَ وُلِدْتُ وَيَوْمَ أَمُوتُ وَيَوْمَ أُبْعَثُ حَيًّا. He says, peace be upon me, the day I was, 3 occasions, the day I was born, the day I will die, and the day I will be resurrected. And peace here is encompassing of a few things. Number one, he will be protected. He will be protected from, number one, the evil of the society that he's being born into, how they have moved away from obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He'll be protected from that. He'll be protected from the influence of the shaitan. And also there's an allusion here to his resurrection, or his, not his resurrection, his, not his return, ascension. It's been a long day. So the fact that before they can kill him on the cross, Allah will raise him up. That he was not, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that مَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُم, right? They did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but rather it was made to appear that way.
Life, death, and resurrection.
Yeah, the ascension is the fact that وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَيَّ, I have been granted peace and protection and safety throughout his life.
Includes ascension is implied, but there's
Right.
no clear.
No. Implied. Yeah, Allah has alluded to that. So that, honestly, I wish we could go through the whole story. If you felt connected to what happened, and that's the beauty of revelation, right? It connects us to something that we would normally have no connection with, right? There's nothing connecting us with that time. But when you recite these ayat and you contemplate them and you try to reflect upon them and you try to really internalize them and you try to personalize them, you're automatically connected to revelation. You're connected to the prophets. You're connected to the pious people. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst them. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to unite us with them in Jannat al-Firdaus. Allahumma ameen. Hada wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk wa jazakum Allahu khairan.